Hi, and welcome to the katknits podcast. Thanks so much for stopping by, especially if you're new here. Thanks for clicking on that thumbnail and trusting that I'll be somewhat interesting. I'll let you be the judge of that. So in this podcast, I like to just chat about all things knitting, yarn related, anything fun like that. My definition of fun. Today, it's a new year, so I'm now going to chat about my previous month's projects. So every month I chat about what I did in the last month, and we are now in January 2023. I can't believe it's a new year. I don't know about you, but I'm not quite ready for it. I am ready for the sun to start being around a little bit more. I live in Vancouver, BC, which, isn't, I would say, we're basically at the border in Canada, but already we have a lot less sunlight. Like the sun kind of sets before 5 and rises after 8 earlier in the winter. But that does mean that it's colder, so I get to wear all my wonderful hand knits. So pros and cons. With the new year, I kind of I did a little digging through all my stash and did a little bit of a rough plan. Last year, I made a video about my stash debusting, and then I'm gonna do another video which I'll release probably a couple weeks from when this video comes out to talk about my plan. I'm doing the same thing where anything I buy in 2023, I really want to use in 2023, as well as grabbing a couple projects from my stash. My big overarching goal, I think, over the next few years is to really kind of get my stash down to zero. I just love the flexibility of going into a yarn store, getting excited about something, and then being able to cast it on. Whereas right now I have enough yarn in my stash that I might get excited about something, but I have the thought in the back of my mind that I really need to use the yarn that's in my stash. And that's what I'm doing right now, because it's too much yarn for me. I think I'm someone who wants a small stash. I think having a stash of yarn actually gives me more grief than joy, which is weird. I guess I'm just not a collector. It's hard though. Like, for instance, I'm going to be going this year. I would really love to go to Rhinebeck. Well, I'm hoping to go with 3 girlfriends. So while we're there, it's definitely going to be one of those like kind of stash purchasing experiences, but I'm going to have a list of projects that I'm excited about, and then I can like buy yarn for those projects. That's my goal. I also, along with kind of having that use what you buy attitude, I also started a yarn journal. And in the episode in a couple weeks, I'll go through exactly how I'm organizing it and what I'm tracking. I'm tracking my stashes and my projects. I find with Ravelry, I just don't fill it out. I've always been a bit of a pen and paper person, so I'm switching to pen and paper with the idea that hopefully I'll also write down when I start a project, when I stop it, and then any kind of notes that I am curious about myself. And then this way, my notes are kind of private. I don't love some of the things I think about. Maybe I'm not as big to share, just because I find it hard to be critical of someone's work in a public platform, whether that be about the wool or about the pattern. I try to be critical on this podcast, but it's definitely something I'm trying to, get the right balance with, of how to maybe not enjoy something and talk about it, which I'm actually going to be doing today. And I'll start with that. So the first thing that is a project that I've been kind of working through that I want to finish, and it's almost finished. I think I'm going to get it done by the end of January. It's currently a couple days before February 1st, so I'm almost there. And that is the Selma sleeping suit by PetiteKnit. So I originally cast this on. It's the 3 to 6, oops. I got a new mic, and so hopefully I don't touch it. So this is the Selma's sleeping suit. It's the 3 to 6 month old size, and I originally knit this for my niece who's due in late February. She lives in northern Alberta. So I was like, oh, this will be perfect for the baby to be sleeping. It's made with the Barocco's Ultra Wool, which is a superwash 100% wool. Loving the yarn, definitely gonna knit more projects with it, especially baby projects. It's super bouncy. I find it soft. It's nice that it's superwash, and it's 100% wool, so it's going to be warm. The one thing I do find with Broco that I don't necessarily love is their colors. I find they're just a bit dated. It's interesting, like colors go in and out of fashion. So I think they just look to me maybe like 10 years old, the colors. They're just kind of a little more brownie is kind of how I describe them. I do love some of their colors though. Like, I mean, you can't really go wrong with, I believe this is like their white, and then they have like a cream and a black, and those colors, I mean, those colors never go out of style. So, oh, my husband's just coming home. I'm back. He just dropped off our pup goose. So with this sleeping suit, this is probably maybe the third or fourth PetiteKnit pattern that I've done. And I just find all of her patterns, although I love the way they look, they're not necessarily the easiest patterns to read. Like if you're a beginner knitter, I don't think that she really goes through step by step like I've seen a lot of other designers do. And with this onesie, I thought that a 3-month to 6-month-old size, I found that there can be a little variation when you do baby outfits. Like they can either go for the small end of the spectrum, like the 3-month size, or the big end, like the 6-month. I mentioned this before, but I think that she tends to go for the upper end. So when I saw how gigantic this was, I knew that it would not fit, or it just wouldn't work for my niece's child, just because by the time the child would fit this, it would be the middle of summer in northern Alberta, which is hot. The project also has a lot of seaming. So every single, like this is all knit flat back and forth, and then you seam up each armhole, each leg hole through here, and you also do these little feet. These little feet are so cute though. I think that's honestly one of the reasons that I got drawn to this is the cute little flap that you can then, you can do it either way so that their arm is out, or you can kind of bundle it up. It's also got this wonderful hood. I remember reading about in the kind of Nordic countries, a very common thing to do is to actually leave your baby outside of a bar or outside of a restaurant or just outside at your house while they nap. The idea is that the fresh air is really good for them. So they kind of bundle them all up and then leave them outside. So I thought this is kind of like esque of that tradition in the Nordic countries. Honestly, I think it sounds awesome that you can it's culturally acceptable for you to have your baby outside while maybe you're like running in to grab a coffee. So someone actually did this in New York. They left their baby outside and they got arrested for doing it, but they were from the Nordic countries. I think it depends too on the town. So something like a city like Vancouver, it would be I think a little too much on the edge, whereas you can imagine in those, like I imagine the Nordic countries have smaller cities, but actually I don't even think that's true. I bet you their major cities are the same size as Vancouver. Because Vancouver actually is a pretty small city. Canada is not that densely populated. As you can see, I am almost done. I just have to do the last of this arm and then sew on the buttons. I ended up getting these beautiful bright red buttons, which I thought contrasted well with the yarn. So I went with red. I'm gonna actually test to see if these are color fast. So what that means is I'm going to soak this in water and then put it on top of a bit of, soak this in water too, a part of it, and then just see if the button bleeds into the white. I learned that in my yarn store, and I actually, well, where I work part-time, and I actually purchased these buttons from the yarn store as well. One thing, I mean, I'm slightly biased, but I do love Urban Yarns has amazing button selection, in my opinion. Lots of cute buttons, lots of different sizes. So I'm trying out some new ones. I'll let you know how this goes. But yeah, I'm quite excited to be done this project. It's kind of been haunting me. Just all the seaming. It's just, for that reason alone, I would not, unless you like seaming, I would not recommend this project. That and the vast amount of wool that this project took. So this is 400 grams of worsted weight wool. You're basically knitting an adult size sweater. So if you're thinking about doing this as a gift, keep in mind it is a lot of knitting and a lot of seaming. And it's seaming garter stitch, which I find I can just never quite get to look good. It just looks not right. One thing I did try with this, which was fun, is I'm trying to learn continental, I believe it's called. It's where you hold the yarn in the left hand. So right now I like throw, and I want to learn how to do it just where I like pick, it's called. The reason being it's a lot faster, and also I think it might be fun to learn a new skill. So because this was all knitting, because it's garter, you just knit, 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 knit. I was able to try out trying to do the picking, and it turns out I actually had done some picking in like double-stranded color work where each finger I would put a different color on, and then I would either pick from the one over my finger or throw on the one on my other hand. So that was a lot of fun, and I'm still working on it. I don't quite yet have the confidence to do it for a project that's like stockinette and like an adult sweater, something like that. The other thing that I had a lot of fun doing with this project is using my stitch markers to count rows. I talked about this a bit last time with another project, and I think this is going to be my new technique for all row counting in patterns, is to use my stitch markers. So what I did was, because it was back and forth, every time I came across the needle, I would move it 2 stitches, every time I came across the marker, as I was coming up to it, I would move it 2 stitches forward to count the number of rows that I had done. So it would, on my first round, I'd move it 2 stitches in, then I would knit back, knit across, knit back, then I would start my next 3rd row, and when I came across that marker at the 2nd stitch marker spot, I'd move it to the 4th, so that by the time I went there and back, I would have done 4 rows. And that way I always knew the number of rows, because she said, do a decrease every 6 rows or something. And then I wouldn't have to keep track. Before I was trying to count the garter ridges, but that was a bit of a fail. And then I also, like I talked about before, I had one of my light bulb stitch markers on the work, and then on it had the number of decreases I had to do. So if I had to do 5 decreases, I had 5 little markers on there. Then I have another marker counting how many rows. And then once I hit like that 6th row for the decrease, I would do the decrease. And then I would take my little marker off and I'd put a pin where the decrease was. And then I just didn't have to think. And I always knew where I was. I didn't have to look at the pattern. I didn't have to write anything down. I just kind of went through it. So that was kind of a fun little learning thing that I did in January. So since I couldn't give my niece this ginormous sleeping suit, which I'm planning, if someone has a baby, I realize due in August or like late summer, this would be the perfect gift. But I wanted to give her something, so I ended up casting on another PetiteKnit pattern, which was the Ingrid Sweater. And I did that in Double Sunday, which is the recommended yarn. PetiteKnit actually does a lot of Sandez garn patterns. So this yarn is 100% merino. It's a DK weight. It is non-superwash, and it's quite affordable. So it's another great baby sweater. I do think just the fact that it's non-superwash though makes me a little less excited about it. But I did finish this, so I actually ended up finishing the collar the morning of the baby shower, but I got it done. I think I knit that whole sweater in about a week, but I was on vacation, so I was able to knit, and I had a serious deadline that I needed to hustle and get done. Notes on that pattern, again, it's just a little bit hard to read. It just takes a little bit of reading it and then kind of like figuring out the missing details before continuing onwards. I do think the sweater is quite cute. I have a friend who's knitting, I think so I knit the baby one, and I think she's knitting the toddler one, and she was just saying that because her patterns don't have the schematic at the end, she just wasn't quite sure how it would actually fit, which I think is a valid point. I never noticed that she doesn't include the schematics. But she does have great taste. I think she picks very attractive garments. They're all garments that I want to knit. It's just the pattern itself that maybe you just aren't quite sure if it's going to fit well. I actually have another one on the needles that I'll talk about in a bit. In terms of this yarn, I would use it again. I was originally, I really want to knit. I purchased this book, the Sandez Garn Soft. I think it's called Soft for Ladies. It's 2202. That's the number of it. And I want to knit this one on the back. I don't know if I'm going to zoom in properly, but it's the Guthrie Guernsey, I think it's called. Let me find a bigger photo of it. But in here, it calls for double Sunday along with a mohair. So that's it there. And it is the Guernsey Genzer. Guernsey Genzer. And originally, I wanted to try out this wool to see if I would want to knit a huge oversized adult sweater in it. And I think my answer is no. To me, it tends to de-ply, like it feels flimsy. It doesn't feel very like kind of bouncy. It feels almost flat. I don't know. I'm not sure. Like all these things I knit, I realized when I was reflecting on 2022, I knit a lot of gifts. So I don't get to see how the yarn wears. This year, I do want to knit a lot more things for myself. I think I knit over half my knits were gifts last year. So this year I would like to knit more sweaters, and then I can really see how yarn wears, how it washes, and how it holds up over time. Which, there's one thing to enjoy knitting with it and a whole nother thing for how the garment looks after it's been washed and worn, whether it holds its shape, pills, stretches. And that to me is more important. I'd rather have a garment that I really like wearing versus one I like knitting with. I mean, I don't think I'm ever gonna really unenjoy a yarn so much that I wouldn't knit with it. At least that's what I'm thinking right now. So we'll see. Yeah, that project, it was quick, it was cute. I think she really liked it. We'll see how it fits. Again, I knit the 0 to 3 month or 1 to 3 month, I think, size, and it was definitely at the 3 month. And so it was larger, just like Selma's sleeping suit. The other project that is PetiteKnit, so this is my third one, I realized, oh my gosh, is the Cumulous Blouse, and that I believe is her most popular pattern, at least on Ravelry, I believe it. So it was kind of ranked in the top 10 sweaters to do, and that is why I've always wanted to try it. It is a V-neck, and she recommends holding yarn double, but I am actually holding a yarn single that's more of like a sport weight yarn rather than 2 fingerings. And this is, rather than a mohair, it's actually a Surrey alpaca, so it has the same kind of look, but people find this is almost like an alternative. Maybe it's supposed to be a bit softer. It definitely feels very soft when I'm knitting it. So this is what, oops, I don't know if I just touched the mic. So this is what the cake looks like. And as you can see, it's very fluffy and it's very soft. It is a very sticky yarn. So I find I have to I delicately kind of pull it off this way so that I'm not tearing it. And then I have to be gentle just because I don't want to lose this beautiful fluffy halo when I'm knitting. So I'm very conscious, I'm definitely throwing because I don't want to play around with messing up this yarn because it's not the project for me to experiment with learning a new technique for. It's a very relaxing, steady knit. It's just, stockinette with raglan, and it's a V-neck. So you kind of slowly add stitches to the front to slowly bring these 2 sides together. It's top down sweater. There is no short row shaping in the back, which I don't know. I realized that this a couple days ago, and I was like, oh shoot, should I add short row shaping now? I don't know if it's too late. I don't think it's too late. We'll see. I'll keep you updated on if I do decide to do that. I do find I have very square shoulders and maybe just a touch broader than what proportionally to all my other proportions are. So I think I actually don't need as much short row shaping because I don't have as sloped shoulders, although the short row shaping is really for the difference in height between your back and your front. So I do everyone has that. So I think I will add a couple short rows in as well. It's an enjoyable pattern. I've got gauge. This is kind of what I pick up when I don't want to think, I just want to knit. In that sense, it's kind of going to always be, I think it'll take me a while to get it done. I'm not anticipating to rip through it. I'm not really enjoying knitting it at the moment. I think it's because it's one of those things I bought yarn for a little while ago. My dog is itching herself. You might be able to hear it. I bought a while ago, and I more want to use it just to get it off my needles. I do think it's a very wearable sweater. I can see myself wearing it a lot. So that's a real big plus with this one. I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to say. Yeah, I think that's kind of everything I wanted to say about that. And this, in January, my husband and I, we go off to the island and we rent a little wood log cabin, and we disconnect from both the Wi-Fi and cell service for a few days. And when we were doing that, I decided that I would I've always wanted to do a Marie Wallin pattern, and I was like, you know what? Time for a little self-indulgence. I'll go buy all the wool. So I actually started a new project, which, if you're keeping track, I think I have like 5 works in progress right now, but it is the FairIsle patch cushion. I am so excited about this project. So it's worked flat, it's color work, and it's FairIsle. So you're only ever holding 2 yarns at once, though apparently FairIsle can be 3 yarns, I don't know. And you have 2 yarns for about, anywhere from 3 to 6 rows, and then you switch to 2 new yarns. Hence why there is a million ends. I'm very glad that this is going to be a pillow, because I'm not planning on weaving in any of the ends. I'm just planning on probably sewing a back to like capture all the ends, and then sewing like an actual back on the pillow with a zipper. So just kind of encasing this. Yeah, this has been a dream of mine. I really want to knit one of her sweaters, but I wanted to do a project that would kind of ease me into it before, just to see if I liked FairIsle and could, handle a sweater that is all FairIsle. And I have to say, after doing this, I think the answer is yes. It's quite complicated. So this is, you pick up stitches along the edges, and then you leave stitches live that you then grow. And as you can see, it's a patchwork cushion. So you have the middle, then you add 2 sides, then you add 2 sides, then you add 2 sides, and then you add 2 more sides. So it's almost like a log cabin style cushion, and each section has a new chart, a new complicated chart that you do, but you do each chart twice. And it is all knit in Shetland Spindrift. So I didn't realize this. So this is the yarn that Marie Wallin has for a lot of her patterns. Oh, Goose is saying hi. But she recently actually came up with her own yarn. So this is Shetland wool, and it's a bit more of like a rustic yarn. It's a bit sticky, which is what you want for FairIsle. Typically, it's like if you do a sweater, you steek it. So you want the yarn to kind of like felt and stick together. And also for the color work, it just kind of locks the stitches together. So the yarn is great. It is a bit more rustic than I was expecting. Oh, Goose is now drinking from her water bowl. And the colors are a bit more dull, like definitely I thought they were going to be more kind of crazy. Well, some of them are pretty bright, like this blue, and let me find the yellow. The nice thing, so you do parts. I found typically it's almost like as you get on the outsides of the chart are very like low contrast, similar colors. And then when you get to the center of the chart, that's where she typically will do like high contrast colors. Like I think this is a color that go together, and then also like this. Whereas on the edges of the chart, she'll do lower contrast. So something like this, which these are both shades of purple. Working with these charts is, the nice thing is they're all symmetrical. So they're symmetrical left to right and top to bottom. So I find I can just always start on the right-hand side of the chart, even though it's like back and forth. And in that sense, like once I get to the middle, I can even just start copying the stitches to the right of the middle stitch, which helps. However, back and forth, on the way back, you're doing the purl, which means you're purling from this side, and you just have no idea what the pattern is. So then I'm really kind of focusing and like memorizing the chart, which I don't really love. I think if I were to do one of her sweaters, I would make sure it was a steeked in the round sweater, because I think she does have some that do kind of, you know, pick up and you do back and forth, which is not my favorite, and I would worry if I did a whole sweater of it, I might give up. So in that sense, it's been a lot of fun and it's kind of been great. I do have so much of this yarn left over. So like you can see, this is one of the colors. There's 12, I have 12 skeins in total. There was one color was sold out, camel, but I ended up just substituting a color that I had already bought and using that in the place instead. And I think it's worked out pretty well. I don't know if I should do a second pillow, or her sweaters do involve this yarn. But like I was saying, she has her own yarn. And her own yarn, it's not Shetland wool, it's like 3 different breed specific yarns together, and one of them is BFL, which I've knit a couple socks in BFL, and I do love that yarn, and I think I might like her yarn better than this Jameson Shetland Spindrift. The Shetland Spindrift does have a lot more colors than Marie Wallin's yarn. And since I now have 12 almost full skeins of it, I probably will end up doing the sweater in the Shetland yarn just to, you know, take advantage of the yarn that I already have. But if I do fall in love with her patterns then, and I decide to knit a third, then I think I might try out her yarn. And she also has the FairIsle Club, which is now in her yarn. It was in Spindrift and it's now in her yarn, and she does it once a year. And they're these gorgeous patterns, both blankets and sweaters, that she kind of lets in like 500 students, and then you do videos with her. That's a dream of mine that I'm kind of working up towards. This year is a blanket, which actually is kind of great. I don't want to do a blanket, so I definitely will not be doing it this year. But next year, if I can kind of prep myself and get ready, then next year if she does a sweater that I like, I might join it, because you get access to all the old patterns and it would also be in her yarn. So it just sounds like, I don't know, a fun time. It sounds like a fun time. This pattern, I mean, this project I've just kind of been putting down recently with the goal of wrapping up the sleeping suit, and then I have 2 other pairs of socks that are on my needles. So I think this might kind of get a little bit of a rest in February. We'll see though. It's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun to knit. Okay, so last but not least is I ended up signing up for a breed specific subscription. So every month I'm going to get a new breed specific yarn. It's from a farm in Manitoba. It's a small farm. It's a mill as well. It's called Long Way Homestead. And the sheep, I believe they raise some sheep, but for this program, they also have a lot of sheep from around, or wool from around Canada, that gets processed and milled at their location. So this first one that I got, this is the Corriedale. Oops, here we go. And the sheep, I believe, is from Saskatchewan, which is, this is in Manitoba. It's outside of Winnipeg, the Long Way. And they milled it, and it's all undyed yarn. You can either do the fiber or the spun. I went with the spun because I don't spin. And it's all undyed, so I ended up doing a swatch of it. And when you get the yarn, you get a little band that includes the name, the weight. So this is a Corriedale 2-ply worsted, as well as where it is. So Manitoba and Saskatchewan, grown in Saskatchewan, milled in Manitoba. And the approximate meterage per gram. So this is 215 meters for 100 grams. And you get a card about the wool. So I read the card and you can see the cute little sheepies on top. So these ones are known, the Corriedale Sheep are known for the little white top hats, I think they're called, or top knots. They are some cute, those are some cute sheep. So this wool, it's a blend actually between merino and, what was the other one? I wrote this down. Merino and Lincoln breed. So they wanted a hardier, or a sheep that could survive on more rocky pastures, like more kind of hard to live places. So in New Zealand, they bred these two sheeps together to get a hardier sheep while still, I guess, having some of the softness. So it's kind of like a medium fine, I believe they called it. Yep, medium fine yarn. So it's still next to skin soft. I would say it's like, it's softer than the Spindrift Shetland, but definitely not as soft as, like I would say the Barocco is. This is softer than this. So it's definitely not as soft as a merino. It is a shinier wool. It is also very spongy. So springy is what I would call it. So when I wound this skein, because it is so stretchy, like it just stretches a lot. And actually it's known for the crimp, like the strong crimp in the actual, the fiber itself. And I wonder if that's why it's just like so bouncy. But because I was like winding it, and because it was so stretchy, I think what that did is like it was getting pulled out taut when it was winding around the ball, and then it like kind of all stretched back together. So it's a very dense ball, and I actually am kind of worried that it's stretching out the yarn unnecessarily. So I might, for the first time ever, rewind this again. Just like I've heard Very Pink Knits, she talks about how she double winds all her skeins, which to me seemed a little excessive, but I think I might be right up in there doing it because I can see the point of it. They're pretty rustic, so it has little bits of sheep in it, so little bits of hay and all that kind of stuff, so I kind of pick it out as I go. And this is the swatch here. I'm thinking I might, so for Christmas 2 years ago, I got a natural dyeing kit, and all of the yarn is going to be undyed. So I think I might try dyeing it all. I've always wanted to do that. So it could be double purpose. I get to learn about the breeds and then I get to learn how to dye wool. So this yarn, this breed, they said is like very good for absorbing dye. And this, I'm doing a swatch. So I did this in a 4.5 millimeter swatch. I'm going to swatch them all, and I really should find a way to actually label all the swatches. But when I swatched these, I did it on my new Addi Click needles. So as a Christmas gift at the yarn store that I work at, she got us all a set of needles and we got to choose, and I went with the Addi Clicks. So I went with the lace, I believe they're called. So they have like a sharper point, and the Addi Click, I really love this case. It's very, very durable. So I think there's like 8 sizes in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, there's 8 sizes. And here's the inside. And then in the back pouch here, that's where you have like all the cables and some other kind of little notion-y things. And the thing about the Addi Clicks, that's what they're kind of known for, is the way that they lock. So they aren't a screw, which are my Chiago needles, but they actually have like a little spring and a little like lock. So they like clip in, which is kind of cool. So they're not going to come undone ever. But what it does mean is that there's like a little tiny ridge. When I was knitting the swatch, I didn't notice any problems with the ridge. It didn't bug me at all. I didn't notice it. The cable is also different. So actually I have my Chiagu's, it's actually the exact same size needle on the Chiagu. And this is the red lace. So it's a slightly different needle, I think. So the Chiagus are stainless steel, and these, I believe, they're nickel-plated brass. I'll put it below. Everything that I talk about, I do a little description below. So go there for any notes, especially if I missay something like the needles. They have a slightly less long pointed tip. So the Chiagus the needle is, it's a longer taper, and the Chiagos, it looks like, also come to a bit of a smaller point. So they're just a little less tapered than the stainless steel Chiagos, and also their cord is plastic, whereas the Chiago, it looks like it almost has like a metal woven and then dipped in plastic on the outside. I'm really excited to try these needles. So far, great. So far, I'm loving them. So far, I can't tell the difference, honestly. These are known to be a little bit more slippy, so people think that you can knit faster with these than with the Chiago needles. Honestly, I think I'm a slow knitter, and I don't think I will be able to tell the difference. But I'm planning to do, like, I want to do a sweater project with the Addis, just so I can learn a bit more about the difference between the two needles. So I'll get back to you on that. As for what I'm going to do with my 12 skeins of breed-specific yarn, the answer is I don't know. I'm not sure. I would like to, I definitely want to have a swatch of each one just so I can go back and feel it. But I would also love to do either, I'm toying between doing one project that incorporates all the different breeds, so doing something like a shawl or a blanket, or just doing a project per ball. Unfortunately, of course, you get 100 grams. So when you get 100 grams, you're kind of limited with what you can make. Like, they do suggest that this is good for socks, but I only have 100 grams and 215 meters. And I think for a pair of worsted weight socks, I think you would need 2 of them. Maybe I can do like some shorty socks though. I don't know. I'm gonna think about it, especially look how big my swatch is. Like, this is already gonna eat up, you know, maybe 5 grams, too many grams of this. So yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm excited though. Each month in this podcast, I'll talk about the new breed specific yarn that I'm working with, and I'll make sure I'll have a swatch done every time so that I can chat a bit about it. So if you're interested in that, please do subscribe. I think that was everything that I wanted to chat about that I've been up to in the last month. Next month, I think will all be about finishing the projects that are currently on my needle, and we'll see how much progress I make. Hopefully a lot. I don't know. Stay tuned. All right. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you have an awesome February. We're almost through winter if you're somewhere that has the kind of darker, grayer winters. I find February is the hardest month. So let's get through it together. And please let me know what projects you're planning on doing in the new year. I'm always looking for projects to get excited about. All right. Hope you have a good one. Bye.